Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Hi, Amber. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. We're waiting on two persons to join the call. Hi, Akola.
Hello, good day.
Welcome. Right. So I see Tammuke is also requesting to join. How are you? How is your Friday going?
Hey guys,
Good,
Hi,
but
Salima. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Happy Friday. It's
Yes,
been a
thank
long
God.
week. Yeah. So I guess we can begin by just describing a bit about our organization, and then we can begin the conversation. I know our recent posts with the myths and facts. There were a lot of engagement on both pages, and very surprising to some extent.
Yeah.
So I'll start. I'm Christine. I'm from the Breadfruit Collective. It's a gender and environmental justice emerging group in Guyana. And I'm really excited for this partnership with Tammuke because I believe that a lot of our mission align and they're very, very similar.
You want to take it, Akola, introducing us?
not really, but sure. Hi everyone that's watching. So Tamake is a women's-led organization. We really are centered on intersectional feminism. I know in Guyana, feminism is now really a burgeoning topic, and so we really want to ensure that persons have access to information as it relates to intersections between that, the ways in which different women are impacted by social and economic issues, and just providing accessible information out there. So really excited about this conversation today because abortion, reproductive rights are very, very important to womanhood, and just ensuring that they have that sort of information is really great.
Yeah. Well, I'm Salima. So I'd just like to add, all of us here on this live has been working on women's rights issues in a number of capacities, whether it's advocacy, program implementation. I personally worked with a reproductive health organization. So, we have some background on what's going on and on how women's lives are affected when it comes to reproductive justice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. And I guess so this month there's a lot of engagement, like posts and lives that we're planning, and this is all in observance of International Safe Abortion Day, which is observed on the 28th of this month. And we know that in the news, especially internationally, abortion rights and reproductive rights have definitely been making the headlines.
Yeah, I think when it comes to women's bodies, so many issues intersect on women's bodies, and states and men, use women's bodies as a source of control and exerting power. So it's a really important issue. And I always say, if we want to talk about women's equality, we can't leave bodily autonomy out of the discussion whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Akula, do you want to add anything?
Generally, when it comes to abortion, there's just like a lot of heavy stigma around it. So one of the things that I've been really happy about, a lot of the work that has been coming out lately is that it actively seeks to challenge that stigma and frame it as what it is, which is a reproductive right, ensuring that women have access to that. Because a lot of lives are ruined just because they don't have access or information about safe abortion and what that like for care looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. And I remember when we were doing the post, and previous we had a conversation about our own reproductive legislation in Guyana, and it was shocking that Guyana, within the Caribbean region, we're kind of like leading in terms of the legislation front. But if you go to like a regular Guyanese person and you start talking about abortion, they might think that it's completely illegal, and there's so much stigma around it, and shame and guilt that's around something that's absolutely legal in the country.
Yeah, I think this is something Nicole and I were talking about this morning, where it has been legal since 1995, so that is 26 years, if my math is right.
Wow.
But people still, so like the post we had recently about the myths and facts, I realized that for a lot of people engaging in the post was because it's new information, and people are only realizing that it's a legal medical procedure in Guyana. And the lack of knowledge forces person to seek, maybe doctors are not certified and trained, and or self-induced abortions because they think they can't access it anywhere. And that means when there are issues regarding post-abortion care, sometimes women don't seek that help, or if they do seek that help, they don't want to be upfront with the doctors because they literally think they have committed some offense, and who wants to be faced in a fine or jail time, not realizing it's a completely legal medical procedure. And I think this is part of the work, letting women know their rights and what options are available to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely.
You know what's interesting about just like the information abortions is that a lot of times if you don't intentionally search for it, you don't realize that it is legal. And I mean, at one point I didn't know abortion was legal too. It wasn't until I actively started working in women's rights areas and I was like, oh wow, I did not know this, and it was wild to me that all these years, it was legal, available, and people just didn't know. And so, as Salima just mentioned, a lot of times they tend to go to these back alley doctors, and of course, that helps to drive the idea that abortions are unsafe. Because if you
And
believe that it's illegal and you keep going to these unqualified persons where you're not able to get pregnant again, or something is wrong with you internally, then people come away with the perceptions that abortions are generally unsafe, which is not true. As long as you have somebody that's qualified to do it, abortions are perfect. Well, let me not necessarily perfectly safe, but they're very, very safe.
Yes, exactly. Like any medical procedure, once it's done by a trained professional in a safe facility, it's 100% safe. And I
Yeah.
think that information that's lacking. I remember yesterday, I posted something, I think it was the myths and facts, and one of my followers, she noted that one of the things her mom had experienced, so she went to the doctor, but even though the service was there, the doctor talked her out from getting the service. So although we have this really, I guess, forward-thinking legislation in Guyana, there is still so much work that needs to be done in terms of awareness, in terms of actually enforcing this legislation, like making people know that it's actually safe, and making it accessible, because we know that there's so many women, especially indigenous women, they are not aware of this. And for us, even though we've been in this space, I know for myself, only recently I've heard of this legislation and like learning more about it. But again, it's because like I was intentionally looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody wants to talk a bit about the legislation specifically, and maybe we can discuss a bit about like the barriers and access that citizens face.
okay. You want to take it to Fuller, or you want me to take it?
Maybe just a quick point and then you can go right ahead. But I felt like one of the most important points really to just kind of bring out of the legislation is the fact that, you don't need permission from anyone to seek an abortion, regardless of your age, regardless of your marital status or whatever. As long as you want to have an abortion, that is your legal right. And it's something that, even when I was aware about abortions being legal and stuff, that was still something that I was not aware of. I thought that, as with other medical procedures, you would also need the permission of your parent and stuff like that, which is not true. And so I think that's a really important point, just letting persons know that regardless of your age, whether you're in your teens, whether you're married, unmarried, you can seek an abortion.
I think that's one of the points that make this piece of legislation so liberal and progressive for something that was passed in 1995. So like recently there was a case in Argentina where I think she was 11 or 13, a young child, was seeking to have an abortion because she was assaulted, and as a result she got pregnant. And the case had to make it to court in Argentina because it's very restrictive. They have made some progress, but it's very restricted to get an abortion in Argentina. And they couldn't decide exactly who her guardian was because for years she was living with a grandmother, but then the argument was the grandmother was not the legal guardian. Then they were trying to track down the mother, and that was an issue. So you had a court matter going on for a lengthy period, and the child has said she doesn't want this, growing inside of her. And it's really important, especially when it comes to pregnancy. Depending on how far along you are, it can determine what kind of procedure you have access to. And the further along you are, there's heightened risk depending on the procedure that you have to use. So usually time is of the essence. In Guyana, the legislation covers things besides consent. It covers things like access to post-abortion counseling. So you have a right to get a counselor and get advice from a doctor or social worker. But that doctor or social worker doesn't have the right to counsel you in the direction not to receive the service, right? It's their duty or their responsibility to understand what you want and to lay options out for you and probably direct you or refer you to the services that is available. In Guyana, I think it's up to 8 weeks. You don't need to give a reason. You can just go to the doctor and say you're seeking an abortion. There's no particular reason that you need to give. But the further along you are, the more doctors that will need to be involved. But the reasons in Guyana under the legislation are very wide. So reasons include distress to your mental health, poverty, failure of contraceptives, sexual assault, risk of life, physical, if there's going to be a physical danger to continue the pregnancy. So there are lots of reasons that women can tap into if they want to access the service, which, unlike again, is a pretty liberal legislation. There are some countries the only way you can have an abortion is if you've been sexually assaulted or it's causing such mental distress that it's a harm to your life. But Guyanese women have more options and they don't know it. And I think there needs to be some education of doctors too, because I think some doctors are not quite aware of what the law says. And the law is also very specific that a doctor cannot be prosecuted for providing the service. So the doctors too have some protection under the legislation.
Yeah. And I know also in the legislation, also it's like a conscious thing as well. So if doctor doesn't want to, if they don't want to, do the procedure because of some kind of religious or conscious belief, they don't have to either. But I think coming back to what I mentioned before, like one of the followers post on the doctor kind of counseling her mom away from the service, I don't think that that was right in any capacity, like enforcing your personal belief on someone that's seeking medical service.
Yeah, I mean, if the doctor doesn't want to perform the procedure, the law says that they can opt out of it, but the law doesn't say they need to counsel the person out of accessing the service. And I've had friends who've been in that situation where they've made up their mind. They may have questions or question marks, and they go to see a nurse or a doctor, and it's not an empowering experience. And that leaves persons feeling in ways that making choices sometimes they end up regretting, or they think, what would have happened if I have actually gotten this service, where would I have been. The reality is being a parent is not easy, especially when cost of living is high. People have all these reasons, and they're valid reasons for not wanting to continue a pregnancy.
Yeah, exactly. Valid reasons. And I see there's a question here that's asking if there are facilities within all the regions in terms of having getting access. And I think that's a really important question because we're all from Georgetown and there's many facilities that we can walk into, private, public, and the services are there. But when we talk about persons in other regions, especially in Guyana, when you leave capital, the other regions are remote, they might not have that privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Because
Yeah, I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but when it comes to access, it's really something that is hard when it comes to outlying regions. When you look at the rates for deaths by abortions or just being mutilated and stuff, a lot of times these tend to be from interior locations where they don't have a lot of qualified professionals. And so a lot of times persons would have to travel miles just to get to Georgetown, or I know New Amsterdam used to do it. I'm not sure if they still do it, but it's within these very popularized areas, and persons who reside outside of these areas don't really have access to abortion services. And of course, it makes it difficult for them to navigate that. And a lot of times persons are forced to carry through their pregnancy or seek, you know, unsafe methods of getting rid of that pregnancy. Guyanese love to believe in, I mean, it's a Caribbean thing generally, but all kind of bush to do all kind of thing, and a lot of times it can be really, really detrimental to your health and your body. I remember there was a case wherein a young woman, she decided to drink Gramazone to get rid of her pregnancy, and of course she died. So these are some of the things that lack of
I think
access.
she injected it into herself.
Yeah,
Um,
into her abdomen.
she was in Region 4, actually. I remember this case.
Mm-hmm.
Adult woman, I think it was somewhere in the East Bank, but she didn't know where she can go
Yeah.
and the procedure. And I think, at the end of the day, we have legislation, and it's the responsibility of the state to provide resources and to educate the public, right? Empower people to be able to make that decision. It's more than just saying, oh, we have legislation and we're great, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that women have access to the service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. I think we all came to that conclusion was we have this legislation that's so progressive. It's one out of two countries in the Caribbean to have a legislation of this kind, but yet our general population, we still don't know about it. We don't know if we're talking about accessibility. When you go into the hospital to get this, there's still this stigma around it, and there's still so much shame around it. So there's
Mm-hmm.
so much awareness that needs to get done. And I'm so grateful with Tammuke and the Breadfruit Collective that in observance of this really important day later this month that we have like a month long awareness kind of session on the legislation and accessibility and just general information that the public should be aware of so then we can engage persons because even with our posts there were so many people outside of Guyana that was commenting on how progressive it is and it is very progressive but it's not perfect.
Yeah, on the point about access and resources, Sulima and I were talking earlier about the fact that despite the legislation being in place, government intentionally just didn't funnel a lot of resources into just ensuring access was available. So it wasn't until like a few years ago that Georgetown Public Hospital actually started offering abortion services. And eventually Diamond and so started to offer it. So all of these years, despite it being legal, persons were not able to access abortion unless they went to a private clinic. And of course, this brings up a lot of other costs about, those who might live in poverty just might not be able to afford it because the cost can be restrictive. So yeah, I mean, ensuring access really is one of the best ways just to ensuring that women are safe and are able to make certain decisions over their own bodies.
Definitely. And Yeah, I think it just goes to show that legislation is a starting point, but it's not like an end all be all. There's the work continues. Like to get the legislation passed, it's a lot of work. And I've been reading a lot of reports from that time. Every day the newspaper was bombarded with like religious comments and things like that. So passing
Mm.
legislation is really important. A lot of work went into it. But 16 years later, if we're still in a position whereby people still don't know that they can access the service and there's still deaths that's happening because of unsafe abortion practices, like, we have to revise the work that we're doing, and it just brings in again how important continuous awareness is, in regards to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness and advocacy. I mean, there's a lot of work, post 1995 done by women activists to really get it actually offered um, at the Georgetown Public Hospital. And I know there's ongoing work by other groups to expand that service. Um, but yeah, we definitely need more women knowing what's going on and advocating for our officials to make that service available. It's like it makes as much sense as saying you can have an appendicitis surgery in Georgetown, but you can't have it if you're living in Curriverton or if you're living in Latham. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a medical procedure, and abortion is healthcare, and healthcare is a human right.
Yeah, yeah, I like that you said that. And just switching gears a bit, we've been hearing a lot, in the Caribbean. We know our sisters and brothers in Jamaica, they're also in the same fight for their abortion legislation. And then we know that in the States, in the news, we've been reading a lot about abortion rights, and access to abortion. So I guess my next question is just, what does reproductive justice means to you, to both of you, and we can have a conversation around that.
Mm. Yeah, reproductive justice to me largely surrounds on, what we were just talking about regarding access. Because if you continue to have legislation and that legislation or lack of resources being funneled into ensuring that it actually works, then it's just a piece of paper, which I feel is a lot of the legislation that tends to be put out in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean. So governments need to actively ensure that as much as they finally cave into the pressures and adopt certain progressive ideals, that they actively put resources to ensure that persons are able to access it. And so that would mean not only funding hospitals and private agencies that support abortion care, but also ensuring that persons have access to information on abortion. Let them know that it's safe. Try to break down a lot of the stigma surrounding abortion so that people know what their options are and they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that 100%.
For me, reproductive justice is, like Akola said, is moving beyond the law and making sure the law is working for the citizens. So that would include the services, having access to the service, having information, and just going beyond abortion, but having access to free contraceptives, access to comprehensive sexuality education, which has been an ongoing conversation for years and years, but there has been some resistance. But people need to be informed, educated. I'm always, a lot of times we talk about women's empowerment, but we don't really define what we mean by empowerment. Empowerment is not just like a girl boss brunch, but we got to be doing more than that, right? It's about resources, agency, and knowledge. So you have the knowledge, which I think sometimes we push a lot, and we make people aware, but there isn't enough support where people have the agency to put that knowledge into practice and then have access to the resources to put that knowledge into practice. So it's a combination of factors that I think that lends to justice. So it's a lot of work, and everyone is doing their own pieces. And we have people offering services free or heavily discounted. We have people, like what we're doing here in terms of raising the awareness. But then we have to also remember there's a major responsibility of the state
Yes.
to, provide these services to citizens.
Yes. And I agree with what both of you said. I think when we're talking about empowerment, it's something that I guess it's being used globally as a marketing strategy, but we really
Yeah.
have to think about it as a regional thing. Like, what are the women in Guyana dealing with? What are the issues they're dealing with? And how can we work with them? Not tell them what to do, but how can we work with them, listen to the issues we face. And I know through the breadfruit, the focus is on gender justice and environmental justice because I feel like the two intersect so much. So when we're talking about gender justice, it's really important to talk about high rates of domestic violence in the country. And when you're talking about domestic violence, that's also related to abortion rights and access because I feel like in both situations, the patriarchy is there. Women doesn't have the right to their body. They don't have the right to their choice, and the state itself is not creating spaces for women to like bring themselves to the table and to be their whole self.
Mhm.
And I'm glad you raised that issue, with domestic violence, because I think a lot of the work, which is really important because domestic violence is a pervasive issue, intimate partner violence is a pervasive issue in this country. So many women and girls could recount their own experiences, whether at the hands of family members or intimate partners. But ultimately, all these issues intersect because we have a society that says women are not supposed to do this, women are not supposed to have this kind of control, women are not supposed to control their fertility, their sexuality, and then that intersects with violence because violence is seen as the answer to control people and to resolve conflict. And all these issues really and truly intersect. And I'm really glad we're having these discussions because we need to start digging deep. It's just not a man woman issue. It's not just an issue of women not respecting themselves, but it's deep seated structural issues when you're living in a patriarchal society.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah, just to build on, one of the points you made about the intersections between DV and abortion and stuff like that. One of the things that Tammuke did recently was look at, reproductive coercion. And a lot of time it's not really identifiable because persons still see men as having control over women's bodies or having a say over it. And so a lot of times, women might feel very pressured to go through with a pregnancy or abort a pregnancy because of their partners. And of course, it's not just men as it happens in queer relationships also, but it is something that also needs to be raised and addressed because I feel like a lot of times women feel that they need to cave into their partner's demands about their bodies and whether or not to go through with pregnancy. And so just ensuring that they know that, they have that right to make decisions about their body and control what it is that they want to do, I think is just a really important point to highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these issues are so intersectional because we, as women, we face so many different issues. And if we're talking about marginalized groups, indigenous groups, they're already facing certain situation when you're coming up with a decision about somebody's body, like you should involve them to at the least, because when we're talking about abortion issues, there's also we have to talk about mental, the economic aspect as to why a person may decide that this is something they want for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some people don't appreciate how life altering a pregnancy is. It's not an easy thing. Like, who thinks it's an easy thing? The other day I was at the doctor and I saw a pregnant woman and she was wearing these compression socks, right? Because your blood pressure could skyrocket during a pregnancy. It could be so dangerous. There's a risk of blood clots, stroke. It's like your body is doing the most to sustain another life, and it's like, screw you, I'm going to focus on, I know I can put you to the worst. So I mean, pregnancy alone is not easy. Like, I've known women who've said, after one pregnancy it was such a traumatic experience, they don't want to go through that again. And women like that need choices and they need access. sometimes contraceptives fail and you have to make that decision, and that decision is that individual's own.
Yeah. So I know we talked a lot, and we've been posting continuously in observance of International Safe Abortion Day, again celebrated on September 28th. And we have a few other lives in stores and other discussion around access. And we want to continue this engagement. But before we close, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I think I would like to close just to give people an idea of where they can access the service. We talk about it not being that accessible, but it's available for free at Georgetown Public Hospital. I'm not too sure exactly what are the requirements because things with COVID, some procedures have changed. They probably would maybe ask to see a vaccine card or PCR test, but you can reach out to the hospital to get more information. Just reach out to the family planning clinic at the hospital. And then in Georgetown, there is Guyana Responsible Parenthood Association that provides low-cost abortion services. I think it's offered at New Amsterdam Hospital. Um, as far as I knew, a couple years ago, they were offering the service, medical and surgical abortion. Um, but yeah, there. Those are the resources I can think of top of my head.
There's also one in Diamond.
Diamond? Okay, good. So you have those services in Region 4. At one point, it was offered in Latham, but I'm not too sure if that's the case. But yeah, there's more work in terms of expanding the services.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely throughout the month, we want to hear from other people, and definitely like we want to expand this conversation as a regional conversation. So including people in the Caribbean, people in Jamaica, maybe in Barbados, who are also working in the same fight to spread awareness and continue the conversation on this topic.
Any last words, Nicola?
Not necessarily, but I'm glad that we're having these type of discussion and look forward to everything else that we have planned.
Yeah. Definitely. And I want to thank Tammuke and both of you so much. I'm so grateful for this partnership, and I really do agree that there is a lot of work to be done, but I'm so grateful that we have people who are invested in this topic and who are committed to committing their time to create information to share with others about this, and creating time to speak on a topic like this, because it is a heavy topic. And I just want to lift up all the women. It's not an easy decision to be made. And so we really have to appreciate the services that we do have in Guyana, and we have to continue to push for more, because there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of creating access for everyone that needs the service.
Thanks so much, Christine.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care. Bye.